Hi. Welcome to The World is Dying and My Degree Doesn't Matter. So now I'm having a quarter-life crisis. I don't know if I'm old enough to be having a quarter-life crisis, but by the looks of it, nobody knows when they're gonna die yet, so this could very well be a half-life crisis, a midlife crisis. I'm having a crisis, period. I'm having multiple crises, I would say. Not just one, very many. Lots of things are happening in the world. Hi guys, my name is Sel. I make videos whenever I feel like it, and today I really feel like tackling the education system, baby. I really wanted to make another university video, and I've been sitting on this idea for a very long time, and I've really put off making a lot of university content because of this issue. So yeah, with that being said, let's talk about it. Higher education is not one of the most important things to be talking about right now. It is a privileged topic to be worried about. However, I did want to start... Am I even sitting properly? Let me face you, how rude of me. When I first started this channel, I was taking it seriously around the end of high school. My whole life was about school, and I was working towards the goal of going to university. And then once I started making videos regularly, I made vlogs about being in university, and I was working towards the goal of graduating. Now I am a master's student, doing grad school, and fully coming into realization of what I've been spending the last decade of my life focusing on. University is kind of benign right now. I don't know if that's the right word. Benign or banal. I can never know. I don't remember which one's which, okay? They didn't teach me that in university. But university is kind of like an empty topic right now because of the pandemic. And a lot of things have been put into perspective because of the pandemic. A lot of people are now doing school in whatever level online because of the pandemic, and it has raised a lot of questions about education as an industry and whether or not the amount of money we're putting into it is actually worth it. I had a sleepover a couple of days ago, and we all got into a conversation about how university is becoming redundant as an institution, especially conceptually. Economically, right, in terms of the system, people are still heavily reliant on university because you need the papers to get a good job. Is that true for everyone? Absolutely not. There are a lot of people within the last 2 or 3, maybe 2 decades who have chosen to opt out of university and have been way more successful than any of us diploma-having people. There are so many alternative jobs, industries, routes that you can take. There are way more, I think, like relaxed and open-minded and critical approaches to education nowadays. However, I will say that it is still, in the mainstream population, a widely expected thing to have gone to university, to at least have a bachelor's degree, and to be a scholar, or having been a scholar, in order to be respected and seen as a professional within the workplace later on, or just as a social, intellectual merit. The gripe that I have, is that the proper way to use it? I'm learning so many new words because I've been reading, and I have no idea how to actually use them in sentences, so bear with me today. But the issue that I think has risen, the issue that is coming into play, that is making itself very obvious right now, is the fact that we spend a lot of money on education, a lot of money, even for privileged middle-class people like myself. My parents, who I'm so lucky to have fund my education, have spent just copious amounts of their income and have struggled financially, just to make sure that I can get the best education with the money that I have. And now that we're moving on to online schooling and we are not getting the same experience that we used to have from going to class physically, a lot of people are questioning, is it really worth it? We pay so much money and we put in so much energy. It affects the rest of our lives, including our mental and emotional happiness, so much. And for what? Right? Especially for my generation right now, the class of 2020, which is my bachelor's, and the class of 2021 in the future for my master's, we don't even know if the economy will be stable enough for us to get jobs in our industries. In fact, all of Gen Z is, I think, at its core struggling with the fact that the world is literally burning. Yes, we read so many articles and we have so many units in our classes about global warming and climate refugees and climate crisis and like countries on the brink of war and racism that is literally splitting countries apart, people killing people in 2020 based on their skin color, based on their gender expression. So much is happening to the point where we don't even know if we're going to be alive, if we're going to be healthy, and if the world is going to be stable enough to foster our lifestyle that people, or the 4 generations, our forefathers, have told us that we need to live. With that being said, I've wanted to make a lot of content recently, especially with the new academic year coming in. I wanted to do a lot of videos about giving people tips on how to apply to university. Because my undergrad was wrapping up, I wanted to reflect on that experience, but I've been grappling with the fact that I don't even feel like I have much faith in university as an institution and as an educational space. And I've really struggled with writing scripts. I have so many scripts for videos, so many bullet points of advice and tips, but I feel phony and fake trying to record them when I don't even feel like the education system and the governments and people working in the education industry are really tackling the core issues and questions that have to do with the industry. I feel like educational institutions are going through an existential crisis right now. And while they're going through this crisis, they're still selling the dream that universities are spaces that you need to go to. And, you know, while this is all happening, high school students are still forced to do their university prep to get the highest grades possible while they're literally battling, trying to have a stable mental health at home while staring at a screen for I don't know how many hours and just trying to focus and finish their homework before they explode. It is not a healthy time right now, and instead of slowing down, capitalism does what capitalism does best, which is just using this disaster, essentially, this horrible time, to their benefit and feeding the same thing that they're selling over and over again in the hopes of, I don't know, maintaining a normal, I don't know. And I, of course, do not have an answer to many of the questions that I have. We're sold this idea that if we want, you know, a semblance of a stable income and health insurance, I don't know, being able to support our families one day if we want them, being able to buy a house, which just seems, it seems so far away for Gen Zs and millennials. Like, that's the joke, that like no millennial or Gen Z will ever own a home. You know, these are all just such troubling, huge questions that we aren't equipped to answer, and when we ask them, nobody wants to tackle them. Nobody wants to even try to find the answer. And I think that's what's frustrating us right now, is that we feel like we're screaming into a void, and instead of someone going, you know what, I hear you, and these are really important things to look at, the only answer we get is, well, why don't we just keep doing what we've been doing, even though we know it's not a system that really works. because we're too scared to undo what we have established all these years, all these decades, centuries, and so on. I was watching a video by R.C. Walden, and in one of his videos he was talking about how educational institutions like the university were created to foster education, were created to foster the excavation of knowledge, right? Sharing knowledge, disseminating knowledge, gaining knowledge, and probably learning new ways to gain knowledge more fast, more efficiently. And because of the capitalization, is that the word? Industrialization? I don't know. Going to university is no longer about gaining the knowledge that you're supposed to gain in order to be, you know, the apt and respectable member of society. It is now about buying your degree, essentially. This process of going to university for the sake of the degree, and just so you have something to show for, that you will need to open all these doors later in life, it has turned learning into the system where it's mechanical. You just need to know this in order to pass this test so you can get this grade and you get your degree. It is no longer about how do you feel about what you're studying. It is not necessarily about critical thinking. It is not necessarily about evolving as a person and helping these institutions evolve with you. And I want to get into the educational canon. I come from the background of arts, specifically art history and cultural studies. My degree was called Arts and Culture, and it's essentially that mixed with, I would say, American politics, a little bit of that. I also have a minor in gender and diversity and inclusivity. So we got all this wrapped up together, right? And there are many, 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 many debates right now that are being had, especially in light of the Black Lives Matter movement, about the canon. What is a canon, you might ask? A canon is a set of works that are seen as objectively good. It is this traditional list of works that are respectable and that people in academia feel like you need to know in order to understand every other work that has come after it, because it is set within that canon. As in, any great thinker after all of these thinkers that are immortalized in the standard, right, has probably referenced or has been taught within the framework of the canon. Because universities are very much set within the Western context, so Western standards, Western works of art, Western ways of thinking, the canon is essentially comprised of dead white European males, sometimes North American, and it's definitely Western European. Now the issue with this canon is we've gone past it. In light of technology, the age of super fast information being shared everywhere all the time, Gen Zs go on social media not only to share their selfies, but also to learn about politics, to learn about culture, to learn and unlearn the horrible systems of institutionalized racism, the patriarchy, colonialism, literally so many things that young people are learning constantly through very easy ways of communication, like infographics on Instagram, or really quick and sharp articles on whatever news outlet they follow. Even YouTubers are making great intellectual content that are teaching people, young people specifically, to critically think and question every single system that's around them, because they're living in a day and age, I'm living in a day and age, where our system has failed us, right? Because of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, classism, etc., are coming to rise during my generation. We see that the education system has not caught up to these things that we've learned. I learned a lot of the things that I know or I knew before university from stuff like Tumblr, from teen magazines. I followed Rookie magazine for a really long time, and they were super political. I followed a lot of independent artists who were based in New York and were in communities that were very diverse, and they were trying to grapple with loving stuff like fashion and beauty, but also taking down the patriarchy and criticizing capitalism and how they sell us this unattainable dream, for instance. And when you get to university, and the only thing they teach you is the same paintings by the same usually horrible white artists, right, who were either the struggling artist archetype, or they were actually very racist and had slave owners. A lot of philosophers that are within the Western canon had slaves. Or you learn about all of these horrible, horrible, sexist artists who clearly use the male gaze to objectify and sexualize femme bodies. The issue is, we were being taught as well by white professors, usually male, usually cisgendered. And this makes a huge difference, because once you bring up the question of why are we learning this, why are we perpetuating this canon that has obviously sort of expired, their answer always seems to be shutting down the cancel culture, whatever they like to call politically correct and all that stuff. But in light of the Black Lives Matter movement and the pandemic, it's clear now that it's not about being politically correct, it's about the fact that this system is literally killing people and the planet over and over again. At first, I think 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, when we were bringing up these questions of why aren't we critically critiquing and disentangling or deconstructing the canon in higher education, professors, the university, the institution, they were able to get away with just saying, well, this is what you have to learn because this is canon. And that's the other word that they always use. It's never traditional, which it is. It's expired, it's traditional, it's conservative, it's, I think, outdated. I think a canon is always going to be exclusionary, exclusive, and classist because it was created to uphold this standard of language and knowledge that sets the elite apart from the non-elite, right? It's about people in certain classes who are able to afford to go to university, having been exposed and taught all of these things that the lower classes are not. And so the education gap, the knowledge gap, widens and widens and widens. And now because of information technology, because of social media, this knowledge gap is closing in on itself faster than the university could even understand how to make an infographic on Instagram. And that's the issue that I wanted to raise. Every single time I or any of my friends have raised this problem with a professor, asking why, instead of just perpetuating the canon that exists and we know is problematic, why are we not more inclusive and diverse, looking at the tension between trying to uphold a classist standard while trying to include voices that have been marginalized and silenced and abused for so long? Why do we just sit still and take it? Why are we still paying for an education that is outdated? Why are we still sitting down in front of the computer, staring at someone talking about something that is outdated when the world is literally in shambles, burning, and there's a global pandemic killing people everywhere? This is the thing that the pandemic is now raising. This urgency. Is university, is higher education urgent when it is not keeping up with the real topics and issues that our generation is facing today? I'm not saying that higher education has never worked. I think it was a formula that worked perfectly well for a lot of the generations that came before us. However, I don't think it works anymore. I think an important thing to note is that a lot of the syllabus is also very much dependent on a professor. So this is dependent on who you hire, not having an inclusive workplace. And that's the thing, a lot of professors who are close-minded and stuck within their Western canon act as if asking for a revisited canon, asking for decolonizing the university, asking for more Black voices to be heard, asking for more women artists to be included, seems as though it's a hard thing to do and that it's non-existent and you're asking for people to bend over backwards for your whims. The issue is that I've been taught by professors who are people of color. I've been taught by queer professors, by women professors, and these people have created inclusive syllabi. They have included important discussions of why the things that they have to teach are problematic and why it's actually not beneficial for your development or growth as an intellectual, but it is important to have these conversations of why people expect it to be. I think a lot of professors use that excuse of like, well, we can't just be politically correct all the time. We can't just cancel these thinkers that have been around for centuries. But it's like, well, number one, we're not asking to completely erase and destroy the system, which, like, girl, if we wanted to, we would. We could. I would love that. I would love to see it. But we're not asking for that. We're asking for more inclusivity and just a little bit more diversity, which has been done. And there are so many amazing and forward-thinking educators who are doing that, who are being mindful about what they're teaching and where these materials come from and what kind of systems they're perpetuating. And yet a lot of my white, cis, straight, etc. professors seem to really struggle with this as if what I'm asking for is absurd. I think that the education system is highly flawed, going back all the way to like kindergarten, right, and elementary school, and the almost like constant refusal for governments to realize just how much money is actually required to be put into the education sector in order for students and schools to be better equipped to put them through university. There are so many debates that are around the education system, not only in higher education. However, which this is a point that my mom raised that I feel like is really important. She teaches younger kids, and she's still in school right now. She's taking her second master's, and it's really raising the question of, well, how could any educator or any school tackle the issues that are happening in early education if lower education is working towards this end goal of sending their products, right, their kids, to university and giving them the right tools and foundation in order to make them fully functioning learners in university or for the university? Then the university needs to be the first educational institution to deconstruct and do away with all of the systems and really problematic requirements that they have. Standardized testing, one-size-fits-all type of education, all these things are common debates that are going on around education, and yet the university seems so complacent and so unprepared to really make any real changes. And that, I think, has been the most frustrating, eye-opening realization that I've had after going to university and while still being in university, is that university is not necessary at all. In fact, it is very much redundant. Not because it doesn't teach you important stuff like critical thinking. In fact, I think the reason why I even came to this conclusion is because I went to university. University gave me the tools to ask questions critically and reflect critically on everything that has been fed to me and question systems in place in society And yet, university is not ready to teach me actual real knowledge, facts, history that is critical and reflexive, etc., etc. And that's the problem. The critical thinking thing, they've got it down to a T. But they are not prepared to change their ways, change their curriculum, to broaden the authors, the thinkers, and the history that they teach us, right? I keep going into classes, and I'm already in a very liberal study. Arts and culture, arts and society, gender and diversity studies. These are all very provocative and non-traditional studies, actually. And yet I still come in every single semester looking at my syllabi and looking at the authors that I have to study, that I have to immerse myself in, and it's the same boring white culture that is classist and oftentimes racist. It's ignorant in a lot of ways and has a lot of blind spots that they overlooked. And yet, when I do use the tools they've given me by raising the question of, well, why don't we look at other people? Because they exist. Every single country in the world has their own canon, and yet here we are in university learning the same names over and over again, no matter where you are, that are set in the West. When we ask that question why, they're not ready to move past just answering, well, they are problematic. That's all that they can give us. A lot of the times professors will acknowledge it, sometimes they completely deny it and think that you're talking back or you're questioning the system and you're being disruptive, which is the very thing that they teach us to do. While a lot of professors acknowledge that it is problematic, they're not ready to do the work and look for other sources, look for other cultures, look for other thinkers, look for other races, genders, sexualities. It keeps going. It just keeps going. Again, I don't have an answer, but I feel like this is an important thing to record and to sort of discuss, because it's the real issue that I am facing with university right now. I don't think anybody needs to hear more tips on how to pass their classes when we're not even sure if these classes are worthy, you know? And I think that it's important for universities and educational institutions and policymakers that have to deal with the educational sector to realize that just acknowledging is not enough. Just saying that you are making critical thinkers but not actually fostering the further teaching of these critical thinkers, that's not enough. We can't just keep asking questions and keep attending classes and feel stunted in our growth and scream into the void. It is not a healthy cycle to keep producing people and minds that are critical and reflective, and yet as an institution you do not want to be critical and reflective towards your own curriculum, towards the things that you're teaching them. So that is all that I have for you today. I think that there's still a lot more to tackle with this subject, and I think that I'm going to feel a lot better about the stuff that I put out into the world and onto the internet, because I think this is the important discussions that need to be held. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like. I would love to start a discussion with you in the comments section. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this. If you are in the educational industry, or if you are a student right now or a teacher, I would love to hear your perspective. My perspective isn't the only one that exists right now. I think that there are so many experiences that differ and are intertwined with each other at the same time as we're going through this turbulent era. And if you enjoy my content, I have a website, I have my Instagram where I like to tackle other societal questions. And that's pretty much it from me. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great day wherever you are. Bye.